Welcome back to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Feels like I just left, but it was day one of a two-day IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship and Michelin Pilot Challenge test here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway ahead of September's return of IMSA to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And notably, this was the first test that we've seen the full field of GTP cars, each manufacturer represented here today. A very exciting day here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Got all the details, got some interviews. Let's get into it. So September 17th, we'll see the return of IMSA to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for the first time since 2014. There were three sports car races that are somewhat traced lineage-wise to the current IMSA series. First, there was a Grand Am race in 2012, then another Grand Am race in 2013, then ALMS and Grand Am merged, and we got one in 2014. We'll go over the history later on in this video, but it will be a 2 hour and 40 sprint race. It's called the Battle on the Bricks. It's not very long. The actual Michelin Pilot race will be much longer than the WeatherTech Sports Car Championship, but there has been a discussion today about endurance racing here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Now, they already do it in the SRO with the Indy 8 hour, but obviously, it doesn't quite hit the same way, let's be honest, without the prototypes involved. And so the question and the debate has raged a little bit about whether or not this track is worthy of an endurance race, believe it or not. And we'll discuss that later on in this video. But let's take a look back through the history of this event. It's a fairly short history, there's no doubt about it, but it's interesting nonetheless. I mentioned Grand Am. 2012, this race was envisioned originally as a companion to the Brickyard 400. That was a point when the Brickyard 400 was definitely falling off a bit. They looked to find some interest and they attempted to bring Grand Am here. It was kind of a weird event. I believe it took place on Thursday and Friday. Not many people showed up, and thus it only lasted 2 years under the Grand Am sanction. In prototype in 2012, it was Star Works Motorsports, the Riley Ford driven by Sebastian Bourdais and Alex Papau. And in GT, it was Magnus Racing, believe it or not, in a Porsche 997 GT3 Cup. John Potter and Andy Lally taking the victory in GT. Now, these are the classes that are the direct lineage to the current two top classes in IMSA sports car competition. 2013. The first two runnings of this race were at the 3 hour distance, and believe it or not, actually considered endurance events back in those days. It was once again the number 2 Star Works Motorsports Riley, this time powered by a BMW. Ryan Dial, who is also here driving in an LMP2 today, and Alex Papau teaming with him, becoming a undefeated driver at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. The Risi Competizione Ferrari won in GT. It was a Ferrari 458 Italia driven by Max Pappas and Jeff Siegel. And then in 2014, it was the merger race. This was what we called the Tudor United Sports Car Championship at the time. The race was reduced by 15 minutes, no longer considered an endurance race, and Action Express Racing broke the Star Works Motorsports stranglehold on the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, winning overall in a Corvette DP with Christian Fittipaldi and Yao Barbosa. The GT division was won by Scuderia Corsa. This was actually called, believe it or not, GTD all the way back then. And the Ferrari 458 Italia, Jeff Westphal and Antonio Balzan were the two drivers. And it should be noted that GTLM was at this race, and it was won by the SRT Viper, if you remember that car. And the winner of that very first Grand Am sports car race here, or at least one of the winners, was Sebastian Bourdais. He returns to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, but this time behind the wheel of a Cadillac GTP car. Now, Bourdais' record is almost unmatched in the modern era. Only a few select drivers have won more championships and more races in IndyCar than him. He's a 4-time Champ Car champion, winning 37 career IndyCar wins. He started 10 times on this very course and 9 times in the Indianapolis 500. He has 11 IMSA wins, the most recent coming at Laguna Seca this year for his Chip Ganassi racing team. Here's Sebastian Bourdais on what he expects in September.
I mean, it all depends what it's going to be for the race, right? I mean, if it's 100 degrees for the race weekend, then it'll be very relevant. If it's cool, then for sure you'll have to make a small adjustment, but overall, if it's slightly cooler and a little overcast or something, it's just going to be a bit easier on the tires. Right now, it's obviously putting everything to its limits. Left side tires are really hot after 4, 5, 6 laps. So, the only big variance as well when we'll come back for the race is that there's going to be very heavy traffic. So you cannot put the tires as much in a corner and in a box than you are when you're just constantly running really hard and having very little traffic interference. So it's actually might be a good thing that it's very hot today, because the duty cycle and how much energy you put in the tire might be quite similar. So we'll see. I mean, it's always very difficult to anticipate conditions, and we're given those circumstances today, and tomorrow maybe it's a bit more overcast and a little cooler, so it might give us a different read. But overall, I think it's not that critical one way or another.
You mentioned that the track's different than when you won here. Not as many GT cars as we're expecting for the race in September, but how's the traffic situation right now? Are there any places on the track where traffic's a bit difficult for you guys?
It will be, for sure. Once you hit turn 4 and then, the S's, you kind of stuck behind. There's nowhere to go. And then same thing once you get in the back section over there, 7, 8, 9. Like it's a one groove place, and you can try and dive bomb someone, but that's until kind of marbles builds up, and then it'll be a lot trickier. So I think traffic will obviously play a big factor in the racing. You'll have to be a bit lucky and read it well and protect yourself, because it's going to be very easy to make or lose positions.
So while many of the IMSA teams were here, several teams, including many, and I would say most of the top GT teams, chose not to test here. Now, the reasoning I was given by at least one driver on one top team when I asked, hey, are you here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway? And the answer was no, and the answer was because the feeling among many teams is that it was too hot to test. There's not going to be a lot of data that's going to transfer from now in the dog days of summer to the beginning of fall here in Indianapolis in September, and I don't necessarily disagree with that logic. The other logical part of a lot of the teams not participating is that many of them have been conducting private tests over the last 2 months here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Now, it's important to note that the GTP cars have relatively stayed off of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Acura conducted a test in early April of this year, but really, we haven't seen much GTP equipment on the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. That was until today. Let's take a look at all of the cars that participated in today's IMSA test. And we start with GTP, and I'm going by garage order, so the numbers are going to be a little off. The number 5, JDC Miller Motorsports Porsche, makes its first appearance in one of my videos. That car debuted at Laguna Seca this year, and it's coming off of a podium finish. The number 60 Acura for Meyer Shank Racing is also here. 01 Cadillac for Chip Ganassi Racing. The 7 and 6 Porsches from Penske Porsche Motorsports are also here. And the number 10 Wayne Taylor Racing with Andretti Autosport Acura. The 2 BMWs are here, and there's an interesting story developing with those. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And the number 31 Cadillac was one of the fastest cars today. LMP2, 3 cars were here. The number 18 Era Motorsports Orica, the number 11 TDS Orica, and the number 04 CrowdStrike Orica, which didn't sound too hot in the morning warm-up, but for whatever reason, they got the engine fixed and got it back out there. And remember, or I should say, notably, I am noting the chassis. Next year in P2, it will not be a spec class. There is a Ligier joining the fray. LMP3 was also here, but only one team represented, both driving with Duquesne's, the number 13 and 17 AWA car. And GT Pro, one car represented in GT Pro, and it's the number 14 Lexus. GT DM was the second most subscribed class here today. The number 1 BMW for Paul Miller Motorsports, the Lexus number 12, 32 Mercedes, 77 Porsche, 78 Lamborghini, and the number 80 Porsche, most affectionately known as Rexy. So the number 31 Cadillac was more or less the fastest today. I didn't quite get to see the timing as much as I'd like to. If you'll remember, here in IMSA during these tests, they don't give timing and scoring. That was the same when I covered the GTP test. at Road Atlanta, but there was timing and scoring to be found. So when I took a look at it, the number 31 Cadillac was on top. Their lap times are around 1 minute 15, which is a little bit slower than the Indy cars we're used to on this circuit, but not that far off either. And pretty much all the cars were under that blanket. A few of them were in the 116s, but it should be really noted that these were unofficial times and everyone plays games in testing. That's just the way the cookie crumbles. IMSA and endurance racing here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Now, I mentioned in the history segment that the Indianapolis Motor Speedway was originally considered to be an endurance race when it joined the Grand Am calendar in 2012 and 2013. But 3 hours, frankly, isn't much of an endurance race. Hell, 6 hours isn't really much of an endurance race these days. So, you know, it never really fit in with a true endurance style race. It never felt like that. Certainly didn't feel like the SRO 8-hour race that takes place here. So do I think there's ever a possibility that Indianapolis Motor Speedway could get an IMSA WeatherTech endurance race? No, I don't. And let me explain my reasoning. If you look at the endurance races that are currently on the IMSA calendar, there are 4 of them. Teams are quite happy, as I understand it, with that many endurance races. You've got a 24-hour at Daytona, a 12-hour at Sebring, a 6-hour at Watkins Glen, and a 10-hour race to end the season at Petit Le Mans. And my understanding is if ever there were to be a 5th endurance race, that just simply wouldn't happen. It would just replace one of the other 4 endurance races. And what do Road Atlanta, Daytona, Sebring, and Watkins Glen all share in common, not only with each other, but also with the series itself, IMSA? They're all owned by NASCAR. So logically speaking, even if Indianapolis made a compelling proposal to have an endurance race here, which of those NASCAR tracks are going to willingly give up their endurance date, which are very coveted on the IMSA calendar, for what is essentially a competitor in the Indianapolis Motor Speedway? And of course, Roger Penske owns IndyCar. So I just don't see that happening. Now, the caveat being that the World Endurance Championship is heavily, heavily rumored to be coming here and racing starting in the year 2025. Now, the question is going to be whether or not that's a double header with IMSA or not, kind of Sebring style. And Sebring was decided that that didn't mesh with the teams and the series. And I think Indianapolis does that a little bit better. It's in the middle of a city. There's good steakhouses to go to. You don't have to drive 2 hours away from the airport to get to this racetrack. It's a Grade 1 track. It fits much more the style and feel of the World Endurance Championship. As much as I may disagree with that, I thought Sebring was perfect for that series, but it sounds like the Circuit of the Americas is only a temporary solution, and likely we're going to see a 6 or longer hour race here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway starting in 2025. It just won't be IMSA. I had a really interesting discussion with Renger van de Zande about the Indianapolis Motor Speedway road course, and he gave me one of the most interesting comparisons I've heard in a minute.
That's hard, man. Yeah, I've been to Kansas.
Kansas. The Roval.
But we had an infield with Kansas.
Yeah.
Must have been the same year, actually.
Yeah, 2014. Yeah.
Yeah. So it kind of reminds me of that. It was a cool track, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, I loved it. Obviously, a different heritage and a different history and all that, but what else? I mean, we don't have anything like this in Europe.
No.
Nothing. You know, it's a compromised track.
Mm-hmm.
At the end, it's an oval, and they made an infield with it, same as Daytona. But yeah, hard to compare anything. Yeah.
So real quick, just one more thing is that Colton Herta was here testing the BMW. I believe it was I'm going to get this wrong, so it was I believe it was car 24 today. He'll be in 25 tomorrow. He's testing both of the cars, and I would, while don't have this confirmed, I would assume that if he's testing the car, you don't typically test cars without having an intention to race at some point at the track you're testing at with modern testing restrictions. So my curiosity is that Colton Herta may participate in the Battle on the Bricks in September for BMW. He already has a start for BMW at the Rolex 24 at Daytona, so it wouldn't be completely outside of the realm of possibility for him to participate in that race. Now, whether he'll be in both cars, one car in that race, we don't know, but considering he's shaking down both cars, I'll let you put 2 and 2 together. So yeah, unfortunately I won't be here tomorrow to cover day number 2 of the IMSA test. I'll actually be at Newcastle Motorsports Park working as a pit reporter for Kart Chaser. That's always a fun thing to do. It's the SCUSA Tour, which is one of the biggest in the country. So really cool opportunity to see some of the up and coming drivers in karting. And the next race, ironically enough, that I'll be covering is here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the Brickyard Grand Prix weekend, along with the Verizon 200 for the NASCAR Cup Series. As you guys know, I'm quite excited about that one, a strong international field of drivers. So thank you guys so much for watching. This has been David Land on YouTube, here at the greatest racetrack on earth, and I'll see you in the next video.